everybody, welcome to week number 2. Dr. Z here, and I'm so excited about this one because he's going to break down for you the anatomy of type 2 diabetes remission. How does type 2 diabetes remission work? So I'm going to go ahead and dive in quickly so that we can get through this. Now, I'm going to share with you my screen, and I'm going to go in a little journey with you of how the pancreas works and how we got here, right? And so here you see the pancreas. This is the pancreas, and it's a little organ right here. And this organ has two types of cells. One cell is the beta cells that produce insulin. So you've heard about this word insulin. Insulin is always there. And then you have maybe heard, maybe not heard of glucagon. Glucagon is another hormone that doesn't get as much credit because we always hearing about insulin, but glucagon is got to be our friend now. Glucagon is the one that has to become our friend to be able to reverse type 2 diabetes. And so I'm going to break down with you guys and for you guys how this whole thing works. And so we know that when you eat something, your pancreas is going to release insulin, and that insulin is going to help your body deal with that and mainly store it, right? So if you bring something into your house, if you bring the groceries, what are you going to do? You're going to store it. So it's the same with your body. Insulin is saying, okay, we got food, where are we going to put it? And so then what happens is that insulin and glucagon kind of start working together. And so if we look at three different things, we have right here, we have the muscle, we have the adipose tissue or our fat tissue, and then we have our liver, right? And now the ratios of insulin and glucagon raise and are a little bit up and down. And some of the hormones kind of, they have that turf. It's like the mafia, like they have a certain area of the city. And then so the insulin is mainly in the muscle, right? Because it's trying to build muscle. And it doesn't want glucagon there because glucagon is trying to break down things. Glucagon is trying to recycle. And so insulin is mainly in the muscle and is mainly a hormone that helps us build. I don't know if you remember a picture that I shared with you of the first girl that had insulin in about 1922, and she went from being like this to being thick, right? When she was type 1 diabetic, right? Because her pancreas was not making insulin. So her pancreas could not store any of the food. It was burning all the time. The problem with type 2 diabetes is that it's the complete opposite. Now, I'm going to break down that for you. And so what does insulin do to the muscle? Insulin builds, takes the sugar, puts them into packages called glycogen, and makes glycogen. This is called glycogenesis. Genesis is like Genesis, the book Genesis in the Bible. That is creation. It's just a Latin word for creation. And so it creates glycogen, glycogenesis. And then synthesis is creation also, is making something. And so it creates protein. Insulin helps build muscle. So really important in the muscle, right? Now, what is glucagon doing in the muscle? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. See right here? Absolutely nothing. Glucagon doesn't do anything in the muscle, right? Absolutely nothing. And so this is one of the main things with the muscle. Now we're moving to the adipose tissue or the fat cells. Now, what does insulin do in the fat cells? Insulin kind of still has the turf. They share a little bit of the turf between glucagon and insulin, but insulin has the upper hand. And what does insulin do in the adipose tissue? Insulin in the adipose tissue actually Remember, fat is lipo, and then genesis is creation. And so insulin creates fat. Insulin creates fat. Insulin creates fat. Think about that one for a second. Insulin creates fat, right? And then what is glucagon does? What is the glucagon do? Glucagon lysis is to break something apart. Lipolysis is to break fat apart. Glucagon breaks fat apart. Now, is there a pill for glucagon? Actually, there is in the hospital. When people, as blood sugar really go low and they're having a hypoglycemic event, we give them sugar or we give them glucagon. Glucagon goes to the liver and immediately starts making glucose, and I'm gonna go to that next. And so now we know in the fat, now in the liver, glucagon manages the story. It's got like he's the TARF owner, and glucagon mainly does remember glycogen? Glycogen is just packets of sugar put into packages. So glucagon breaks them down. What do they break them down? Into sugar, so we can use it. That's why when you're fasting, sometimes your sugars go up, or in the down effect in the mornings, your sugars go up. That's why they go up, because your liver is saying, hey, we need sugar in the blood. We're not used to this low blood sugar. Boom. So your body knows what to do. Your body knows what to do. And that's why a lot of times when I hear people that, oh, type 2 diabetics and they're going low, I need to eat all the time. That's not true. It's just because you probably are taking too much insulin. But if you lower that, and if you lower the amount, and if you increase the amount that glucagon is working, your blood sugars, your body's gonna know what to do with the accumulated storage that you've had. And so over all of these years, type 2 diabetics, over 14 years, they've been building up. And insulin has been working. And so it's overflowing it's trying to build in every organ. But it gets to the point where all the organs overflow, it leaks into the blood, and that's when you have the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. But it's really been about 14 years that you've had it. And so then glucagon is the one that we need to start focusing on. How do we get more glucagon? How do we get to work with more glucagon? And so glucagon breaks down the glycogen stores and then makes sugar. You would think that that's a bad thing, but where does it make sugar out of? It makes sugar out of fat. It makes sugar out of the stuff that we already have stored. It recycles it and makes it into something that we can utilize. And then lipolysis. What is lipo? Is fat. Lysis, breaks down fat. Glucagon is becoming a good friend of yours now already, right? Good friend of mine. And then ketogenesis, it makes ketones. It also makes ketones because it's telling your body's telling, okay, you're not eating sugar. Let's make another form of fuel for your brain and for all the organs. And so this is the main thing, right? And so in that way, you're having anabolism, or the creation of stuff, led mainly by insulin, and catabolism, the breakdown and the recycling of stuff, mainly led by glucagon. I hope that makes sense. Now, I'm gonna try to give you a little bit more cool information here. So what happens is that in anabolism is like feeding and storing, right? And in catabolism, we are having more insulin sensitivity, meaning that your body, it just needs a little bit of insulin, not too much. Autophagy, that means that your body is getting rid of old cells. It's recycling old cells. It's killing the cells that it doesn't need, like a wound has to get rid of the dead stuff, right? Mitophagy actually gets rid of the old mitochondria for energy. and then lipolysis, it breaks down fat, and it activates brown fat. Brown fat is what actually makes us warm in the cold. So brown fat can be very helpful because it actually creates heat from burning its fat. So it's really interesting. Brown fat is just super interesting, and you can activate it with cold showers. So, anyways, that's another story for another day. But so then what happens? What happens? What happens if we give somebody the SAD diet? What happens if somebody fasts? And what happens if we give somebody the low carb diet? What happens if we have this person eat any one of these, right? What happens if we give him fasting? What happens if we give him low carb? What happens to the insulin? What happens to the glucose? What happens to the insulin? What happens to the glucose? What do you think? What do you think is going to happen? So let's say here, I'm going to share with you guys what happens when you're fasting. So when you're fasting, look what happens. The ratio determines what's happening in the blood, right? And so in a fasting state, the glucagon and the insulin ratio, there is more glucagon and little insulin. That means if there is 2 of glucagon and 1 of insulin, that's 0.5, right? And so it just depends. So the bigger the glucagon, the bigger the number. Now, during a fasting state, the ratio is about 0.8. 0.8. So glucagon is a little bit bigger. That means that you are in a catabolic state. You are breaking down fat. You are creating ketones. You are breaking down glycogen. All of that good stuff. So in a fasting state, you end up with glycogenolysis. Lysis is to break down, glycogen is packets of sugar into fat. Gluconeogenesis is genesis of sugar. So it makes sugar for you to use out of the stored stuff that you have. You see, it might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but it's making sugar. You don't need to eat it. It's going to make it out of the fat that we all have stored. And it'll make it so that we can utilize it. And it'll break down fat to do that. And it'll actually make ketones out of all of that. So it's really, really, really interesting. Now, what happens when we eat the SAD diet? Oh boy, the standard American diet. What happens is that beautiful little pyramid that they gave to us about 1977 that told us to eat a bunch of grains, a bunch of bread, a bunch of cereal, that the breakfast was your most perfect meal of the day, that you had to eat a bunch of breakfast, all of this, right? What happens to your insulin levels and your glucagon ratios? It goes to a 4. It goes to glucagon insulin ratio of 4. What does this mean? This means that you're going to have genesis of glycogen. So packaging the sugar into fat, right? Because there's going to be a bunch of grains, bunch of carbs coming in. So you got to package them up and put them in. It's like when you buy groceries, you got to package them up and put them in the fridge. Packing them up and put them in the fridge. If you buy more groceries, you're going to pack them up and put them somewhere else. But then they're going to start rotting because you can't fit everything in the fridge. So it's the same with diabetes. The carbs is going to help rotten your kidneys, leading to diabetic nephropathy. It's going to help rot your brain, leading to Alzheimer's disease. It leads it increases your risk of Alzheimer's disease. It leads to your liver rotting, leading to fatty liver disease. It leads to your pancreas, fatty pancreas disease, cardiomyopathy, diabetic cardiomyopathy. So all of this, right? And it also stops you from breaking down old cells. So it's like you keep the old. It's like a wound that is rotten, right? And so, and then it also does not allow you to make ketones. So anytime you take carbs, it doesn't allow you to make ketones for energy. So it's not recycling anything. It's just packaging and packaging and packaging. And it's like packaging stuff that can't even fit in the fridge anymore, right? And so that's the SAD diet. Now, what happens when we give somebody a low carb diet? Ooh, look at this. So the ratio is 1.3, meaning that glucagon is bigger than insulin. And that means, my friends, that when glucagon is bigger than insulin, that means that we are making and breaking down the packets of glycogen and making glucose with it. So that means that your body is eating, but it's saying, no, we need to break down the stuff, the stuff that's stored, the fat that's stored, and make sugar with it so this person has fuel. And so our bodies are smart enough. It makes fuel. It makes fuel. In the absence of insulin from the outside, our bodies are going to make sugar and make sugar. Whatever we need is going to make it to be able to give us fuel. Yeah, type 2 diabetic for sure, right? And then it's going to break down fat, lipolysis, break down fat, and ketogenesis. Keto is ketone bodies, and genesis is um, making up new ketones. And so it makes up new ketones and it makes up new glucose. So it's going to give you fuel from your own store. Now, the amazing thing is that if you take these two things, right? If you take the standard American diet that is triggering your insulin level to go high, and a low carb diet that is triggering your glucagon to go high, that way you're breaking down the fat that you already have stored and using it. What happens if you give it protein to one of these two? This is the amazing thing. That's why it's so important for you to get off of the standard American diet. Whatever it takes, because what happens is that if you give somebody with the standard American diet 1 gram of protein, guess what happens? The ratio goes to, holy moly, to 70 with protein, right? With protein. So that's why when people ask me something healthy or not, that's why we have to test it. Because if you're still in a standard American diet, even the protein can raise your blood sugar. Not as much as the carbs, but it can raise it up. So you can start building more fat, it can start building more, stopping you from breaking down the dead stuff that has to go. And so that's why it's really important. Now, what happens if we give a person in a low carb diet 1 milligram per kilogram of protein? What? Let's see. It stays the same. And actually, I somehow the little thing got erased here, but it stays the same. It stays the same. It's 1.3. 1.3. So the glucagon is managing this, right? When you take protein and still in a low carb diet, um, the glucagon takes care. And so that's why it's so important for you, if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to reverse your type 2 diabetes, that you take these carbs low. And then the prescription is 20 grams a day, 20 grams a day. So just remember, so that you can have glycogenolysis, breaking down of the glycogen or the sugar that has been stored into fat, glycogen, breaking it down so that you can use it as sugar, gluconeogenesis, Genesis is the creation of sugar from your own body stuff. And then lipolysis, lipo is fat, breaking down fat, and then ketogenesis. So you make ketones for energy. That's the beauty of this whole thing. And so I hope that that made a lot of sense. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know. Look at the difference here of this. And this is where your body and your pancreas starts to heal, because it doesn't have to work that much, because the alpha and the glucagon cells start working more and start working more, instead of putting all of the work in the insulin. The insulin shouldn't have to work a lot. It should not have to work a lot. And so your insulin cells will have to start taking a break and be able to relax. And that's when you start healing from the type 2 diabetes. When your pancreas doesn't have to produce so much insulin, and the glucagon is actually recycling all over your body all of the stuff that was there, all of the stuff that was that's starting to rot your organs, literally, like your eyes with diabetic retinopathy, your liver, your heart, your kidneys, diabetic nephropathy, diabetic cardiomyopathy, and your liver with fatty liver disease, and gangrene, your feet. And so all of these, that's when people start to heal from this, when they really tap into using the glucagon. All right, everybody. And so how do we do that? We do that through low carb, and we do that through fasting. And remember, the little ladder that I shared with you guys is, doesn't matter if you're vegetarian or if you eat animal protein, you can take those principles into the N=1, into that prescription where you are testing your food. And when you are trying to keep your carbs, you know, if 20 grams is too much for you, you can start with 50, but 20 grams a day, guys, and you have to measure it, because when you're using food as medicine, you have to be granular. In the hospital, I have to use specific doses at specific times. So you have to get granular with the food. Learn about the food, chemistry that is going into your body. All right, everybody, that is it for today. I hope you guys have a phenomenal day, and I see you in the next week. Your mission for this week is to actually fast anywhere from 12 hours to 16 hours to 18 hours to 24 hours to 72 hours, whatever you feel comfortable with. Just do a fast. What I ask you to do is do it a little bit longer than you've done it in the past. If you've done 12 hours, do 14. If you've done 12 and you want to do 16, do 16. If you've done 14, do 18. If you've done 24, do 26. You see what I mean? So whatever you feel comfortable with, just take it a little bit longer. Remember that as you do this, you want to stay in touch with your doctors, and you want to make sure you are, as advised, lowering your insulin levels by 20%, so that, you know, and checking your sugar, so that way you're not going low because you're in too much medications, right? Your body's gonna know what to do, but if there is so many medications, you wanna make sure you kind of balance them out. All right, that's it for today, guys. I hope you have a phenomenal day, and doctors here, remember, take it easy. Bye-bye.